G'day! Welcome to Shooting the Breeze with Lady Liberty. I am Lady Liberty or Kate Fantanell, and I'm coming to you from a different location from normal. I have left Western Australia, for those of you who don't know. I've hit the road. I'm heading up to sunny Queensland because there is an election on the horizon in Queensland. I'm currently in South Australia in my parents' kitchen, so please bear with my old-fashioned background. But today, I am so excited. I feel like I say that every episode because I'm so blessed in my life, this life of adventure and liberty and libertine, where I meet so many incredibly inspirational people who have helped me on my journey, my political activism, given me a voice and put trust in me without even meeting me. So today, please welcome to my show a man who has had my back since the 2022 election. He had me on his show on TNT Radio. It's been such a support to me. Mr. Rick Munn, welcome to Shooting the Breeze with Lady Liberty.
Thank you, Kit, for the warm welcome, the kind words, and obviously the invitation to come on here and talk to you for a change. Instead of me talking with you, you're talking with me now. So if it's reversed, it's all good.
I know it's exciting. I always love putting people in the chair. I've had reverse slow chat with Topher. I put him on the spot with a few questions. So I'm ruling the roost today, but it's all good. We've got a lot to talk about because you and I have something in common. We are both journalists, I would say. You've got your own show on TNT Radio, Locked and Loaded, which you had me on back in my Senate campaign days, which feels like a lifetime ago now. But at the moment, we are looking at a world where free speech, freedom of expression, information, reporting, the media itself is under the biggest threat that I've seen in a long time. And even going back through history books and propaganda and the way the media has been controlled, I feel that now, in this day and age, post-COVID, there's an onslaught of control of information. And I went on your Substack today and had a look at your latest video, and you said all roads lead to control, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, telling the truth. Truth can withhold scrutiny, and the levels of censorship in the West, it is now looking like a communist nation across the board. You're in the UK, I'm in Australia. What do you think, as a journalist for TNT, how do you see this playing out? What are we going to do to fight back against the powers that control the information, the governments, the corrupt elite? How can we get the message out, the truth out there when there's so much against us?
Okay, it depends on what the medium that you use to speak truth. Okay, so they say the pen is mightier than the sword, but I say the voice is also mightier than the pen. Okay, so as long as you have a vocal cords, if you've got a larynx, a functioning larynx, and oxygen in your lungs, and something that you have to say, literally, they can't silence you at the minute, literally, unless they lock you up in a soundproof room and don't allow anybody any access to you. So it's important to remember it's very discouraging at the minute. And it's wrong and it's dystopian what's happening with the online censorship at the minute. You remember during those COVID scandemic years, if you even typed the word vaccine on the social media platforms, you were banned. If you questioned the government narrative in any way, you were banned. That was online. And it's important to remember that although online is a huge platform for us, both you and I at the minute, to get our messages out there across the world for whoever will listen to them, if that was all removed in the morning, Kate, we still have our physical bodies and our physical voices and a physical world to go out there and sock it to them in figuratively speaking, as in the people that are trying to destroy our lives, destroy our economies, destroy our bodies, destroy pretty much everything, tear the world down and build it back better, as they say. So just on the point that you make, internet, pre-internet days, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago, there's always been revolutions. There's always been overthrowing of tyrants and despots right across the globe since the dawn of time. So even if the worst case happens and we get disconnected and we're censored by online speech laws, okay, we still have our physical voices that we can use. We still have a world out there that we can get into and make contact with actual human beings in, which I believe is more powerful than anything we'll do online anyway. So we have both platforms at the minute. And I think it's very, very important that we use both. But at the same time, if you were to get disconnected today and we never communicated again online, I'm pretty sure that you wouldn't stop doing what you're doing, and I'm pretty sure I wouldn't stop doing what I'm doing, albeit through a different channel. So there's that to bear in mind as well. And also, I'm very flattered that you would refer to me as a journalist. I don't see myself as that way. I know you've studied and you're a bona fide, legit journalist. You are, that is. For me, I just picked up a mobile phone 3 years ago and started speaking little pieces to a camera. Didn't think anything of it, was just documenting what I was seeing going on at the time. And one thing led to another. And, in a strange turn of events, I ended up getting a live radio gig with an Australian radio station, given that I have no connections with Australia and I live in Ireland. Okay, so that's a story in and of itself, but that should inspire listeners as well, that whether you do things the formal route, the correct route, get credentialed as a journalist, as you have, and massive respect to you for doing that. There's a lot of so-called citizen journalists out there as well. I call them lazy journalists. They bypassed the formality and just picked up a camera, started typing into a Substack page. They also have a massive part to play in everything that's going on too, because there's literally an army of citizen journalists out there now, and I think they fear that army because it's growing and rising and getting stronger literally by the day. So yeah, onwards and upwards. We'll have to keep fighting the good fight no matter what the medium is.
Yeah, let's talk about the fight. So at the moment, we've got the misinformation, disinformation bill. In Australia, we've also got the European Union, where you are the Internal Market Commissioner, Thierry Breton, with the Digital Services Act, giving them the power to delete hateful content, their different definition of hateful. We've got Macron's call to censor the internet, the president of France. When things get out of control, we might need to be able to regulate them or cut them off, is what he said. And Breton said, I am the enforcer, I represent the law, which is the will of the state and the people. So this is the EU we're talking about. And then obviously in Australia, we've got our own battles happening with our government and their wish to be able to define what is true and what is not, and to exempt all government communication and content from their definitions of true and untrue. So this is what we're up against here. They're using parliaments, they're using world bodies that are not elected representatives of the people, despite them claiming that they are, controlling the information. So like he's pointed out, we've got Substack, we've got citizen journalists, which I'm grateful for and I respect, putting themselves out there. So they play an important role too. But what do we do when we have the people, the power, the puppets controlling everything? We are looking at imprisonment. We are looking at huge fines that will bankrupt us. We are looking at just being wiped off the internet like that. With all of this happening, what message does that send to you? What do you think is their intention, and why are they coming down so hard now after what we've seen the last few years? What's your theory?
Well, if you look at the case of Julian Assange, for example, what's ongoing with him, the torture that he's being subjected to in Belmarsh prison in the UK has been now for 5 straight years. Before that, he was taking refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy. He faces deportation to America to stand trial for up to 175 years. Prison, so effectively he's going to die in prison. Mike Pompeo has openly admitted that they were planning to kidnap him or kill him. So that's one guy who stood up and told the truth, revealed a lot of secrets. If you've watched the Collateral Murder video, for example, that's responsible for flipping a lot of people and making them realize, hey, maybe the American government is not the good guy. After all, they're capable of atrocities, the same as any other tyrannical dictatorial rule. Okay, but Julian Assange is being scapegoated, I believe, to put the fear into people like you and people like me, who obviously don't have the platform and reach that he does, but nonetheless we have platform and reach in the areas that we're operating in your case very much Australia, in my case very much the UK and Ireland. So when you put a lot of people like us together, all of a sudden we have as much reach, if not more reach, than, for example, Julian Assange. So I believe that the tactic is at the moment from the government is to make us fear individually. Okay, so what you rightly say is, well, we could end up in prison. We could end up, doing a lot of time for this. We could end up being fined and bankrupt. Yes, as individuals, that could happen. But if we continue to do what we're doing en masse and more people continue to join in the fight, they haven't got the infrastructure. They don't have the facilities. They don't even have the court ability to prosecute everybody, and they certainly don't have enough places to imprison them. I don't know what it's like in Australia right now, but UK and Ireland prisons are busting at the seams. They're currently overcrowded. So if they were to come after you and me, for example, and 5,000 other people like us in our immediate vicinity, Kate, they literally don't have the administration capabilities to penalise us through the court systems, and they certainly don't have enough places to lock us up. So I think it's important to remember that we are a collective here, and they can't do anything against the collective when it comes to prosecution. They just can't. They don't have the facility for it, but they can frighten us individually to say, well, hang on, look what happened to him if he spoke out. And that's where mass non-compliance is crucial. If you're doing this on your own, and I'm doing this on my own, and we only have a handful of people doing the same thing, it's easy to come after us and put us away or fine us because we're low-hanging fruit. But if there's enough of us and we keep banging that drum, that war drum, ever louder, and more people join the ranks and say, you know what, to hell with it. I don't care what happens to me. I'm not prepared to lose my liberty, my freedom of speech, my future, my children's future. All of a sudden, when you have an army of people that don't give a damn, that's ungovernable and uncontrollable, peacefully, non-compliantly, but that's how we get the victory in this one. Have to remember, we're not individuals, we're fighting this as a collective unit.
I guess to go back a step, how do you think we got to this point where the mainstream media can no longer be trusted? I'll tell you a little story about when I started as a journalist. So I studied journalism for 3 years, and then I moved back to the country town I grew up in to work at the newspaper because I love where I'm from and I love being in this part of the world. It's absolutely beautiful here. And then we did an expose on the council and found out that a councillor's family member was awarded a council contract without going through due process. So a bit of nepotism there. So we wrote the story, had the front page ready to go, and the day before it was published, my editor called me and said, we're not going to run the story. The council have threatened to pull all their advertising for the year, which would mean we can't run the paper. So that's just an example of a little council in a small country town in South Australia that had that much control over what would be printed in the local press. So you can imagine, especially during the pandemic, when the government is the one with the money, using our taxpayers' money to buy these advertisements to control the narrative. So, but how did we get from, because I went into journalism back in 2006 when I went to uni, ready to report history. I wanted to record what was happening, the truth, for the future people to read back and look at what happened. We don't have the truth anymore. And like you said in your video, telling the truth can be the only thing that withholds scrutiny. So how did we get to the point that the mainstream media, which is meant to be the fourth estate, which is meant to be a service to the people to report what is actually happening, has become a propaganda arm of governments, council all over the world? How did we get there, Rick?
Well, it's been a slow process over time. It didn't just happen overnight, as I'm sure you're aware. This has been an incremental increase in their propagandizing. The BBC, for example, is the British government state propaganda arm. RTE in Ireland is the state broadcaster, effectively a government propaganda arm. They're trying to make it legal and compulsory for people to pay TV licenses. In Ireland, so many people are now stopping paying their TV licenses because they realise that RTE is compromised, and it spouts lie after lie after lie. The government are actually talking about taxing people now through their tax bills to pay for state broadcasting because so many people are scrapping the license. So that shows that they're concerned. That shows that the drop-off in licensing payments, for example, in the UK and Ireland, that's an indicator, Kate, because people have always talked, I don't need to pay my TV license, but people are actively cancelling it now. And I don't mean, radical activists. I'm talking about people right across the spectrum, young, middle-aged and old. They're disgruntled, they're disgusted when they see the lies that are being put out there, and a lie eventually will always be outed. You just cannot keep a lie undercover forever. So as more and more lies are coming to the fore, more and more people are getting disgruntled and realizing what's happening. So therefore, the governments and the censors and the regulators are upping their activity as well to try and stem the flow of people that are listening to them going to other platforms like the Lady Liberty broadcast or TNT Radio or whoever it happens to be. So they're obviously very concerned about this, and it always reflects in numbers. So sometimes you question yourself, well, is any of this making a difference? Have we made any ground in the last 2 or 3 years? I think the answer without a doubt is yes, because there's certainly a lot more people that I know personally are now questioning everything that they're being told by government or mainstream media sources. Maybe didn't in the past. I didn't in the past. I didn't really care too much. I was too focused on what I was doing, in my own little sphere of operation in my life. It was only the last 4 years that really gave me a shake and made me scratch my head and made me ask more questions. So again, maybe the lies certainly, and the lack of integrity and the nepotism has always been there, but there's more of it now and more people are aware of it, and that's why I think they're coming down really hard at this time. And you mentioned all those hate speech laws, and Ireland and Scotland at the minute, for example, are undergoing crazy hate speech clampdowns with talking about jail time, 2 years in prison, £3,000 fines if you offend someone, say a hurty word to someone. So they're really coming down hard at the minute, and as you know what they say, when you're over the target, that's when the flak is most intense. So I think we're over the target right now.
Just a comment on the hate speech thing. So I had a conversation with a mate the other day, and their point of view was, well, we don't want to be upsetting people, and some of the content that people post is quite vile. But I made the point back to him, well, is it better to have those opinions out in the open with the light shone on them so you can argue with them and try and convince them that their views are abhorrent? Or do you want to ban them and drive them into a dark corner of the internet where it festers and they hang out with people who share the similar horrible view, and then next minute it turns into something happening? Why haven't governments accepted that is such a high risk? It would be better to allow people freedom of expression. Say whatever you like, to keeping in mind that don't call for violence. That's where I draw the line on hate speech. Say whatever you like, as long as you're not inciting violence. That's where I am at with that. But it seems that governments just want to shut everything down, label anything that they don't agree with as hate speech. What do you think should be done?
Well, I think we should just keep doing what we're doing at the minute, because obviously it's working and obviously it's effective. So the reason why they want to shut us all down, and again, it boils back to that opening quote that you made about control. All roads lead to control. There's an old saying that all roads lead to Rome, but in this case and in this day and age, I believe all roads lead to control. And anything that is uncontrollable from the government's perspective is dangerous to them. So if they couldn't control the movement of people, for example, in the different territories and states of Australia over the scandemic years, that was a problem for the government. If people were coming out and protesting in Canberra, and 1 million people, or they were coming out and taking to the streets of Perth, or they were taking to the streets of Sydney or Melbourne, making people aware of what was going on, that was a problem for them. That had to be controlled. If people were dissenting in their jobs, they wouldn't take the vaccines, they wouldn't take the jabs. One person in a medical profession saying, well, I'm not taking it, could be a fly in the ointment for the government. Say, well, if she refuses or he refuses, what if their colleagues say the same thing? And if enough of them refuse it, it discredits us. They lose control of that as well. What you can say online, maybe you're not protesting in the streets, maybe you're not in a job where you were mandated for vaccines, but you're reporting on it. You have an Instagram page, you have a Facebook page, you have a Twitter page. You start typing those words out, and all of a sudden one of them could trigger a permanent suspension. Again, they're losing control. So when they lose control, it's like any abusive relationship, Kate. When the abuser starts to lose control of the person that they're abusing, they step up, I would say, the campaign of abuse. It becomes more intense, it becomes more frequent, it becomes more overreaching. And I believe that's what we're all in. We are in abusive relationships with our governments, not to disrespect anyone who's physically in an abusive relationship with a disgusting partner right now, but I'm talking in principle. We are in abusive mentally, physically, and arguably spiritually abusive relationships with our government. governments at this time. Therefore, when they fear the loss of control, that's when they ramp up their intensity even more. And that's why we're discussing this today.
Speaking of control, digital ID.
Mm-hmm.
You retweeted a TNT Radio tweet. RIP Australia, incredible, not a whimper, nothing, pathetic. Your life is not your life anymore. You are now owned by the government. Welcome to the dawning of the age of total control. Your life is simply not yours. Welcome to the digital ID. Now, I know you've had Malcolm Roberts, who is a senator for Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party in the federal parliament here on your show talking about this. He has probably been the most outspoken senator trying to fight against this digital ID that has passed our parliament last week. Why do you feel so strongly against it? I mean, I'm against it too, but I'd just like to hear from you. What's your issue with the government having digital ID and digital information about its citizens?
Okay, well, let's again keep the focus on this control business. Okay, so during the 2020 to 2022, 2023, you couldn't travel, for example, in certain parts of Australia or leave the state or come back into the state unless you took a COVID jab. Okay. Now, you might have wanted to take it. The thought of it might have filled you with dread and loathing, but maybe you just had to. You had to travel, you had to visit people, maybe go to a funeral, do whatever you had to do. So people were being coerced and bullied into taking something that they were fundamentally against because there was simply no alternative route around that. You were physically restrained from moving around, or you couldn't pass the borders without it. Now, extrapolate that onto the digital world. You look at the way the platforms now, online banking is doing away with banking branches. Debit cards are effectively helping to do away with cash. Netflix did away with rental video stores. I don't know if you had Blockbuster Video or Extravision Video, but they're no longer in existence because that platform has gone digital. Look at Spotify. I used to collect vinyl albums and cassette tapes. You don't go and buy vinyl anymore unless you're a hardcore vinyl collector. Why? Because everything's been replaced on a digital medium through Spotify. And even Apple Music, ultimately, when it came out and brought out the iPod for the first time, it helped to kill off the high street music store. Then Spotify came along and helped to kill off Apple Music and iPod sales. People are just using their phones now. So what point am I trying to make here? There has been a move towards digitization, and once you go down that road, you can't go back. So there will not be a resurgence of HMV stores selling vinyl. They're dead and buried. There will not be more banks opening to deal with the influx of people using cash. They're closing. ATM machines are being removed in Australia. They're not being added into society. You get the point that I'm making here? Once you go down that road, there's no going back from it. The bridges are burned as you pass by. Digital ID, I covered this yesterday with someone. There is an app, a government app in Australia at the minute. I think it's MyGov ID, something like that. Okay.
Yeah.
There are 10 million Australians currently using that app. Okay. So if you take a population in Australia, to keep it simple, of 30 million, I know it's 28, 27 million or whatever, call it 30 million, 10 million are using that. 1 in 3 Australians are already voluntarily downloading and using a government ID app to be able to access services. So the seeds are already in there, Kate. 1 in 3 people are already using this. If there's a concerted push on this, with no fight back from our part on the general population, they're going to suck up the lies that they're being told by the government, the same as they sucked them up about the virus and wearing masks and social distancing and not going outside for more than an hour a day and isolating yourselves from your families. People are gullible and very susceptible to persuasion when it comes to the government because they have a slick psychological warfare unit operating within them. That's a fact. In the UK, Susan Mitchie, who's an out-and-out member of the Communist Party, was part of a government nudge unit to instill fear into everyone's minds, and damn it, they did a fantastic job. They terrified the population into compliance. So with digital IDs, you will find that they're not mandatory to begin with. the same as the jabs were not mandatory. Okay, but if you don't get them, then you can't access goods and services. You can't access a bank account. You can't book a flight. You can't leave the state. You can't prove who you say you are. So they'll say, well, Kate, it's not mandatory. Stick with your paper driving license, but we can't open that bank account for you. We can't allow you to travel on an airplane. And all of a sudden, you're back to square one. Coercion, bullying, and control. And I also believe digital IDs, unless they are implemented, the much touted CBDC, central bank digital currencies, they cannot be implemented without a digital ID platform to begin with. And when they come in, if and when they come in to replace cash, then all your transactions, all your money is completely under the control of the government in the country in which you live in. And again, it all boils down to control. So you can say what you like online, but if they don't like it, push the button and your bank account gets disabled, or that flight of yours gets cancelled, or that hotel stay of yours gets cancelled, because all of a sudden you're at the centre. And we saw that as well during the Canadian truckers protest, if you can remember. What, 1 million people descended on Ottawa in February of 2022 to protest against Trudeau's tyrannical regime in Canada. What was the first thing they did? They froze their bank accounts. They suspended their driving licenses, and even when GoFundMe raised $10 million for them, it was suspended as well. 9 million of that money was held back and had to be sent back to the donors. And the people that donated were also penalised. If they were in professions like the police, they traced the donations back and penalised them as well. So we've seen this taste of this already, and that's what's going to come if they can get this digital ID over the line and people to buy into it en masse. I hope that answers your question. I was rambling a bit there.
Well, you'll be interested to hear that in my former home state of Western Australia, that I have fled as a refugee because of the firearms laws they've introduced. They are making it mandatory to have a digital firearms license on the firearms registry digital database, which we saw them give that private information to the media back in March 2022, which they used to print a map identifying where we live. Yes, that's right, where firearm owners live, what guns we had. They even had different colours, so pistol, rifle, shotgun. Horrifying what governments can do with our data. And the fact that these new laws have included it to make it mandatory to have a digital firearms license. The mind boggles of what these people, what their intentions are with that information. So I agree with your point, but what can we do? We have a government in Australia that is run by far left-wing Labor Greens who have pushed this through. They're claiming it's not mandatory, but as you've just explained, the boot of the state will be on our neck until the point that, oh, you needed to do a tax return, which you have to legally do in Australia. So the fact they're claiming it's not mandatory when it is a slap in the face. What can we do? We have another year into the election. Lots of Australians don't like it. I saw that tweet and I was a bit, we're not all part of this. We're not all marching to the beat of the state's drum, but it's at the point now, and that's why I've become a bit of an anarchist, because I don't like the system. It's not serving the people. They're pushing through Fabian socialist things. They're changing our culture. They're taking away our big cars. They want us to all live in 15-minute cities. They want us to all have digital IDs for everything. And that's just happening in Australia. What can we do, Rick? I know that's a $1 million question, but what can we as individuals do to push back against this tyranny?
Well, as individuals, listen, there's an old, I don't know how you would call it, an illustrative story about what can you do, what difference can you make, you personally, me personally, okay? And this sounds a little bit cheesy, but it's worth it, okay, when you get the point of what I'm trying to make. So apparently, the story goes, there was an old man walking along a beach one day, and the beach was full of starfish that had been washed up on shore, and they were all dying. Okay, they were all dying because they couldn't get in the water. And there was a kid on the beach. This little girl was on the beach, and she was lifting these starfish up one at a time, and she was throwing them back into the ocean. And the old man stopped and said, "What are you doing? What are you trying to achieve here?" She said, I'm saving the starfish." And he said, "Well, you're just alone, and there's millions of them out there. You're never going to save them all." And she smiled and she said, "No, I'm not." And she held up the one in her hand. She said, "But I'm going to save this one." And she threw it into the ocean, and she just kept on going about her business on her own. She couldn't save all the starfish, okay, but she could save the ones that she had direct access to. And again, collectively, if we are to succeed in this, okay, without taking to violent revolution, which I don't advocate either, by the way, peaceful non-compliance, there has to be mass buy-in of what we're talking about and resistance to what we're talking about. And literally, people can vote with their wallets. That's the most powerful voting tool of all. Never mind a ballot box. If you vote, if you're running a business, your customers vote with their feet and vote with their wallets. So if you're delivering a terrible service, or you're simply not getting the business in through the doors because you're substandard, you serve dodgy food, or your customer service is appalling, people will simply take it elsewhere. Now, you could be thinking, well, that's different with the government. What can you do with that? It's like, technically speaking, tax returns. If nobody in Australia, or 50% of the population, didn't file a tax return tomorrow, and I'm not saying don't file a tax return, but in principle, what are they going to do about it? They can't come after 14 million people. And even if they do, okay, what are they going to do with those four? Lock you up? Fine you? Refuse to pay the fine? Everyone refuses to pay. They can't do jack. Their power is in making you believe that you're a small, weak, insignificant individual or small group of insignificant, weak people, when in reality, when we all come together, and that's why we have to keep pushing this collectiveness in terms of our kickback and our pushback. If we don't have the numbers, we can't make the difference. But if we do have the numbers, we absolutely will make the difference. So for what it's worth, you have to keep doing what you're doing until you don't have breath in your body to do it anymore, and inspire other people to come alongside you. And once you get that momentum going, Kate, it's like a snowball. You probably don't have snow where you are, but if you push a snowball down a hill where I am, or roll it down a hill, it starts off as something that you form and forge in your hand. It's the size of this, but if you keep pushing it down that hill, it picks up more and more snow until by the time it gets to the bottom of the hill, it's so damn big that you can't actually move it physically on its own. So we need to adopt that mentality. We have to keep rolling that snowball down the hill, figuratively speaking, until it gets to the point we can't shift it anymore because it's became too big and too unmovable, and we need to be that way as well. So we just have to keep putting the word out there, mobilizing, resisting, encouraging other people to do the same, because there is no other alternative. There just simply is no other alternative. We have to keep going and not get discouraged, because that's what they're trying to do, discourage us right now. And a lot of people are fatigued and battle worn and battle weary after the last 3-4 years, and it's tough as hell. But if you're going to die, as Iron Maiden once sang, die with your boots on, and it's better to burn out than to fade away. So I'd rather go down fighting than shuffle around as an old man in some dystopian world. To hell with that. I'm going to fight them to the death.
Amen. And I'll be there fighting with you with my little pistols and guns and everything. But peaceful revolution, that's what we're hoping will happen. Let's go back 4 years to the dark times, I call them. When did you think that something wasn't quite right with the information that was being put out in relation to the pandemic? How quickly did you start to think, this doesn't seem to be about public health. This seems to be a little bit of an overreach. This seems to have gone on a little too long. When did you first think something was up?
I'll tell you exactly when. It was March 2020. In fact, right at the very start of April, possibly 2020. I had a little YouTube channel that I put out some videos on, and this was before I ever did the Twitter stuff, and it was to do with spiritual stuff, all right. But anyway, cut a long story short, I've still got the video. It's timestamped from April of 2020, and in that 10-minute video where I'm walking around, I simply express what I was feeling, the road that I thought we were embarking upon, and the fact that it was very concerning and could lead to terrible things coming down the line. One of which was whenever we were told there was a lockdown, I think the whole world was the same. It was around about March of 2020, give or take a few weeks either side of that. 3 weeks. 3 weeks to flatten the curve. Everybody was terrified. The government went into overdrive with their fear-porn campaigns. Australia was terrified. New Zealand was terrified collectively. UK, Ireland, Europe, Italy was terrified. Everyone, America, everybody was terrified of this so-called virus. So at the start, a lot of people bit because it was dumped on them with no preparation and no way of knowing what was going on. They were just living their lives. But very quickly, I remember when Rishi Sunak, who was then our Chancellor of the Exchequer, who's now our unelected Prime Minister, the second unelected Prime Minister of Britain in the last 2 years, Liz Truss being his predecessor, and before that Boris Johnson, Sunak said, we're going to pay you to stay at home for 3 weeks. Everybody in the UK, 60 million people, 70 million people, and mathematically my head just went, hang on a minute, how are they going to afford to be able to do that? Pay 80% of everybody's wages to do nothing for the next 3 weeks? That's insane. Something's strange about that. And then it was extended from 3 weeks to 6 weeks, and then 6 weeks to 3 months, which became a year and a half in some people's cases. So from a financial perspective, it just didn't make any sense. And then the campaigning and the marketing, when this first came out, actually Chris Whitty, who was our chief scientific officer, I think, or medical officer, and Patrick Vallance, Sir Patrick Vallance, he was another one. These rogues got knighthoods out of the carnage that they caused, by the way. They were coming on TV at the beginning, said, listen, you've got really nothing to worry about. You know, the mortality is next to nothing in this. If you're over 80 and you have comorbidities, you might be at risk, but generally speaking, nothing to be concerned about. Don't need face masks. This will pass. That was the initial government narrative in the UK. Then that got flipped real fast from February through to March and April, and then it became masking is compulsory, washing your hands, social distancing, stay at home, don't see anyone, don't go to visit your loved ones in hospital, you can't attend funerals. I thought, hell's bells, give me a break here. This is ridiculous. You can only leave your house for 1 hour a day. The exercise, it sounded like a prison to me. So you didn't have to be a genius to realize this is insane. And you look around you, I was looking around me saying, well, I haven't seen anyone, nobody I know has even took this so-called COVID, let alone died with it. And anybody that has become unwell has recovered pretty quickly. So this body's dropping everywhere, and you know it's going to tear through as a plague of biblical proportions. That wasn't adding up for me, Kate. So right off the get-go, probably by April of 2020, you know, a month, 6 weeks after this all started, once the initial shock, you know, the best way to attack someone is to surprise them. They're off guard. They don't know what's coming. They have no time to prepare defense. Bang, you get in there and you hit them hard and you hit them fast. That's what happened with us. We were all surprise attacked. We were jumped on. We were jumped from behind, as it were, and attacked by our governments and these fear-porn nudge units within the governments. People were reeling. But if you've ever been in a fight, you know, even if you get surprised, you do get your bearings and you do recalibrate, then your adrenaline kicks in and then you start to fight back. So that's what I think happened with a lot of people after, you know, 2 months maybe. The dust settled, they saw through the smoke and the adrenaline kicked in, and then the fight back started. And then here we are today talking about it. So yeah, it must have been effective to some degree because here we are talking about it.
And did you have a distrust of government before this all happened, or you were a good
Yeah,
socialist? So I don't know if you're a socialist or not. I know we have different views on
I
tax.
just I just distrust people, period. Okay, I'm a very cynical person. I've been screwed around and shafted by people all my life. Probably most people have that are listening to this show today. And what I mean by that is, you know, it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're a government official or not. I always would have had a little skepticism towards people. You know, they come at you smiling in one hand and a knife to plant between your shoulder blades in the other. So the government were people that tended to leave me alone. So I didn't pay any attention to what they were saying and what they were doing. I was just working my little job, doing my thing outside of work. They weren't interfering with that. I didn't pay them any attention. It's when they started to interfere actively in my life, then I put them under the microscope and I started to scrutinize them more, and I came to the realizations that I have at this point in time, just how dangerous and wicked and corrupt they are. So again, government lies, government manipulation, government corruption is nothing new. For as long as there's been politicians, there's been corrupt governments, but they didn't affect me until March of 2020. And once they started to interfere with me in my life and in my business, much like anybody, if you leave me alone, you're good with me, all right? But if you start to control me and oppress me or attack me or, manipulate me, well, then that will change our relationship somehow, okay? I will no longer be a nice, passive guy who just goes about, then you will become my enemy, as it were, and therefore steps will be taken accordingly. So I was aware of government corruption, yeah, but I didn't really care so much about it because it wasn't affecting me directly. And I suppose that's why they've got away with it for so long. They started to affect so many people directly and negatively since March of 2020 with the lockdowns, with the restrictions, with the mandates, with the disgusting way that we were referred to in the news and media, inconsiderate, selfish people who were trying to kill people. You'll kill your granny if you don't apply to this. All of a sudden, the gloves came off when it came to the government and their people. So therefore, I believe that's why there's been such a kickback over the last 3 years, because people are now aware. They're fully aware, and they are being affected by what the governments are doing to them, hence the fight back that we're seeing now.
And speaking of dangerous, wicked, and corrupt, let's talk about the monarchy. So you've been tweeting about this doctored image of Kate's hand or whatever the latest thing from the palace is. You live in the United Kingdom, Ireland. There is Northern Ireland and Ireland. I'm Irish background, so I have a fascination with Irish history. And I would really like to see a united Ireland where the British monarchy leave and let Ireland be unified. Hopefully we'll see it in my lifetime, but I just wanted to get your views as an Irishman on the monarchy and how that has affected your life growing up in the UK.
Well, technically, they didn't affect me at all. In that they were the UK monarchy. They came to my dad. Actually, there's a picture of my dad when he was about 5. He presented the Queen of England with a little packet of linen napkins when she visited my hometown back in the 1950s, I think it was. So, that's about as far as my connection with the monarchy goes. In the 50s, my dad gave the Queen a packet of linen handkerchiefs. That's about as much influence as she had in my life. But in terms of Irish politics, and here's the ironic thing. In the north of Ireland, or Northern Ireland, there are Unionists and Republicans. The Unionists want to remain part of the United Kingdom. Northern Ireland was effectively created back in 1921. And there are Republicans who want Ireland to be united. Now, for 100 years, give or take 3 years, that's always been the way. But there's been a strange flipping going on at the minute. I have a lot of guests on TNT who would be from a Republican or nationalist background. And the thing that they have desired all their lives, which is united Ireland, is not something that they would want at this time. The reason being is because the Republic of Ireland is in the EU, and they're even more globalist and degenerate and twisted and perverse than the people supposed to be running the North. And they realized that if there was a united Ireland at this point in time, it would not be this utopian freedom fighters fantasy where everybody just comes together. The British leave, the slogans that were sprayed on the sides of walls all over Northern Ireland for many years in Republicanism was Brits out, get the Brits out of our country, send them back home to England. But what's happening now? The borders are being opened. In supreme globalist fashion. Albanians are coming in, Somalians are coming in, Nigerians are coming in, Ukrainians are coming in, Georgians are coming in. People are flooding into the country from everywhere. So you can't really come out with the Brits out slogan anymore when you're effectively opening your borders and flooding them with every Tom, Dick and Harry from every corner of the globe. It doesn't really wash anymore. So Ireland is becoming very much a globalist state right now under the current administration. And that's not something anybody with any brains in their head wants to be a part of in the North. It's not worth a trade-off to say, okay, Ireland is united now, but united to do what? To take in more refugees, to have less places to put your children in schools, to have less availability of doctors and dentists, to pay more taxes and have a worse standard of living. Who wants that in their right mind? So it's a bizarre setup here at the minute. And like I said, having grown up, through the Troubles from the late 1960s, I was born in 1973, right up until the ceasefires, so-called peace agreements back in 94 through to 98. I saw a lot of death, a lot of violence, a lot of bloodshed, sectarian murder on a daily basis. People are glad that's over. But the fight and the push from the Republicans was always to have a united Ireland, for the Loyalists and Unionists to remain part of the United Kingdom. But now, even the Nationalists and the Republicans, with any sense in their heads, don't want a united Ireland with this current setup, because it would be jumping from the frying pan and into the fire. So the royal family too, look at their pedigree. Look at so-called King Charles III. His best friend for decades upon decades upon decades was Jimmy Savile, who was the worst, most notorious, most prolific child abuser in British history. Check that guy out, Sir Jimmy Savile, raising millions and millions of pounds for Stoke Mandeville Hospital in the UK, and then going in and abusing disabled and mentally handicapped children that were in that place. He was actually the manager of Broadmoor Mental Institution in the United Kingdom as well, despite the fact that he was a BBC TV personality, had his own office in Broadmoor Mental Institution, where he used to go in and allegedly abused mentally ill victims in there too. That was Prince Charles's best friend. Go and look that guy up. Charles's great uncle, Lord Louis Mountbatten, another horrendous, prolific paedophile, and Charles's mentor, Prince Andrew, the so-called Prince Andrew. Look at his background and his association with Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell. There's a thread of paedophilia and sexual abuse, or associations with people of that nature, running through the royal family. And they say, if you show me a man's company or a woman's company, I'll show you their conduct. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, if you're moving in circles like that, what is your own behavior most likely going to be. And I don't have any time for them at all. They're just rotten, leeching, sitting there on their thrones with their golden scepters and their crowns on, with diamonds that have been stolen from African countries, pontificating about the cost of living crisis while they're breaking in hundreds of millions, if not billions, off of the back of the taxpayer. Disgusting show altogether, and I think their days are numbered. They're falling apart at the seams, literally, as we speak.
So I'm all for that.
Sometimes I can't even remember the question. It just started.
No, I'm all for the monarchy to be abolished and Australia to become a republic. The only problem is I don't trust the people who will be in charge of writing our new constitution, because it'll be the lawyers and the political elite, and we probably won't end up with any rights. Not that we have many now in our constitution. Like you said, during COVID, I didn't have the right. I learned, along with other Australians, we don't have the right to travel within our own country when there is a state of emergency declared, and governments can do that whenever they like. So they essentially control our freedom of movement. We don't even have property rights really in Australia. I've seen that in WA with the gun confiscation. They're offering pennies for guns that are worth thousands of dollars and saying, no, that's fair compensation. There's Australia, we have no rights here. So I would really love to see a republic and the abolishment of the monarchy. So if you're saying that the monarchy is imploding and they'll get rid of themselves, well, bring it on, because they take, and I see very little reward or return on investment anymore from them. I know the Queen was very respected, and we love Princess Diana in Australia. She was very giving and charitable. In fact, she came to the town near where I grew up, so that's my only brush with the monarchy. But I think you're right. It seems at every level of government, whether it's monarchies or federal governments, state governments, world governments, there's corruption and there's evil people running the show. That's why we need more good people out there. So I'm very grateful for the time you've given me, because I think I'm one of the good people.
Yeah, well, you are. And just on the subject of the monarchy, you mentioned Diana as well. If anybody digs into her history and her past and her, being brought into that so-called royal family, the reason why she was so loved is because she wasn't one of them. Okay, if she was a dyed-in-the-wool royal, she'd have been fusty instead. She was vibrant. She was outgoing. She was, fun-loving. She was a down-to-earth human being. So therefore, she didn't fit particularly well with the royal family. She got engaged to Charles. They got married. What an absolute! If you go back and look at some of the there's some great documentaries on YouTube about her life and what happened when she came in, and his infidelity, and whenever she died, the Queen didn't even acknowledge the death at the beginning. And she was in an interview with a journalist, and it's on record. You asked her, "Do you think you'll ever be queen?" And she went, "No, no chance. I'll never be queen." She said, "I hope I'm queen of people's hearts, but I'll never be the queen of England." And in fact, she even went as far as to say, "I think they're going to kill me, and I think they're going to do it in a car crash." She's on record as saying that before she died, in a car crash. You look at Andrew's wife, Sarah Ferguson. She was the same. She didn't fit the mold. She was gone. And Kate Middleton, I don't know anything about her really. I don't really follow the royal family much, but some dodgy stuff going on there. She has not been really seen anywhere since Christmas Day. It's now the 3rd of April. Very high profile royal, told she went into hospital, she had an operation, she's recuperating. All these dodgy photographs, all these weird AI-esque videos that are being released. Very odd, very, very odd what's going on with her and the palace. People are saying, "Oh, it's obviously fake and obviously photoshopped." Of course it is. They're screwing with people's minds. Do you think the Buckingham Palace or the press office is going to release dodgy photographs that anybody could at a cursory glance pick out that they're fake? There's so much mind games going on at the minute. I don't know what's happening. And Charles, apparently, he's got a couple of years left in him. He's been diagnosed with cancer. He's on his way out. So who does that leave? William. He's a globalist rat and a half as well, just like his father. And again, where's his wife? Some dodgy stuff going on there, Kate. And like everything else, time will tell and time will reveal all.
And it's again controlling the information and doctoring images and controlling what the people see. So you've got to look at things through a critical mind. Now, I just wanted to move on. We're coming up to the end of the hour now, but I wanted to talk to you about this so much. What is your opinion on the old traditional left? They used to be anti-authoritarian, anti-war, anti don't tell me what to do, don't tell me what to put in my body, free speech. They were the ones who led the marches against Vietnam. They were the ones who marched in the street saying for the civil rights movement. And now, after the last few years, it seems that we've seen a move from the left. And I'm just taking this from my experience in the music world, going to lots of gigs, when you used to see, Pennywise, Fuck Authority, Black Sabbath, War Pigs, that kind of stuff. And now we have seen over the last few years, these musicians that used to be, fuck the government, are now saying, you have to have 3 jabs to come to my show. You have to wear a mask. Don't come here. This is a safe space for all people. Trans people are people too. Have you seen that too from your experience? Because you're a big muso like me. I'm wearing my Led Zeppelin shirt for yours, listening to them before. Have you seen that as well, the move from the traditional left, which that's how I would define myself, but now they have seemed to be moved to the right. Is that a fair observation?
100%. You look at some of the music icons, the rebellious icons, the protest singers who have been flipped over the last few years. Look at Neil Young, for example. Neil Young's been out there since the dawn of time, strumming that acoustic guitar of his and blowing that harmonica. Now he's just a lapdog of whatever the government tells him to say. I can remember whenever Joe Rogan was doing his Spotify shows and Young didn't like it, he threw a tantrum. He said, "Well, I don't want to be in the same platform as Joe Rogan." So he threw a hissy fit and asked to be withdrawn off Spotify simply because he was sharing a platform with a rabid anti-vaxxer, an anti-lockdown guy. That's Neil Young. Look at Rage Against the Machine. Listen to Killing in the Name of, the ultimate band to stick it in your face and tell the government to go forth and multiply. They were the same. You can't get into our shows unless you've had a jab. Look at Jello Biafra from the Dead Kennedys. Look at Bruce Springsteen, how he jumped into bed, in fact, when he started podcasting with Barack Obama. You think of the way Springsteen was when he was first singing. He was a voice for working class Americans, and working class people all over the world, documenting his struggles growing up in small town America. And then all of a sudden he became a spokesperson for the government. Actors too, Robert De Niro, Hell's Bells, Robert De Niro, of Godfather, Taxi Driver fame, Raging Bull fame, all those great movies. All of a sudden he comes out with some crazy garbage out of the blue and flips on his head. So a lot of people have been very shaken when they see their musical heroes or movie heroes turning, flipping, turning and going to the dark side, as it were. But I think, Kate, I think a lot of people are doing what they're doing because they're highly compromised, and we're hearing more and more stories now of scandals breaking and things being exposed. And if you have enough money and you have enough security and you're older, why would you want to be coming out of retirement or as an old person starting to pipe a government tune? Personally speaking, I believe a lot of these people are compromised and they've got a knock on the door and they've been told, listen, we have stuff on you. This is my thoughts, allegedly, okay? This is my thoughts. If you don't comply, things will be revealed, if you know what I mean. So I think a lot of people have been flipped because they've been compromised, and I think you're going to see a lot more of that being revealed and these stories coming out in the remainder of 2024 and 2025. That will answer, well, why does this person do this? I can't believe they did that. You're going to find out why soon enough.
In my experience, if you can't figure out why someone's making a decision, it usually comes down to one of two things: money or a female. When they're talking
Both.
about men's decisions,
Or
that's
both.
been my experience. Or there must be a third one. There must be dirt,
It
skeletons in
has
the
to be
closet. Yeah.
100% dirt. Think about it. Just think about it for a minute. If I'm a billionaire, okay, and I have all the security in the world and I have everything that I want, you can't bribe me. You can't. You can't do it. I can have what I want. I have everything I want, and then some. You can't come at me with materialism and offer me the lure of security. So the only way you will get me to do anything, if you can't buy me, is to blackmail me, okay, or set me up or sting me in some way, shape, or form to compromise me. And it doesn't take much. You don't need to put a gun to someone's head. You just need to rap on the door and come in and say, listen, I want to show you something, and pull a photograph out of an envelope with you in a compromising position doing God knows what. And all of a sudden you say, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? Don't let that be public. I'll do anything you want. You understand? All of a sudden, they're the most controllable people in the world, those that have been compromised, not those that can be bought with money or lured with women. The past, the skeletons from the past coming out of the closets and destroying their lives, that is the biggest influencer of all, in my opinion. And yeah, like I said, you're going to see a lot more of that over the next 12 months, maybe 24 months, as things get revealed in the public domain.
Well, speaking of the next 12 to 24 months, we do have elections coming up in Australia, in Queensland, where I will be on the ground in the trenches fighting the good fight for liberty. And we have another federal election within a year. I don't know if I will run again or what I will do, but I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all your support, for getting me on your show back in 2022. I was a timid little Senate candidate. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I knew I had to stand for something. And I'd been working for former Senator David Leyonhjelm and being involved in the Libertarian Party, which I'm not anymore. I'm a freedom fighter on my own. But I wanted to thank you for giving me a platform and a voice, and being a real mentor to me, because without you, I wouldn't be where I am today. So I just wanted to get that off my chest.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And listen, I was a timid little review presenter back then as well. I didn't know what I was doing. I had only started out, and you were kind enough to agree to come on my show, and then you've been coming on periodically for the last 2 years. And yeah, keep doing what you're doing. I know you inspire a lot of people. You just you've got a lot of grit and a lot of determination and a lot of resolve, passion, and enthusiasm, and that's what it takes. You don't have to be big and strong and buff, or be some kind of mental wizard. You just have to be consistent, and you have to be passionate, and you have to be dedicated, and you have all that. So you just keep doing what you're doing, just keep grinding it out, and eventually you'll get to where you want to be. I have no doubt about that at all.
And we'll get the world to where we want to be, back to liberty. The pendulum has to swing against this authoritarian nonsense and towards the light of liberty. That's what I believe, and I know you share that passion too. So thank you again. This has been Rick Munn. He is the host of Locked and Loaded on TNT Radio. You can follow him on Twitter at No Risk No Reward. He's also got his own Substack, so have a look at that. And thank you, Rick. I think next time I'll see you, I'll be on your show.
Yeah, all being well, fingers crossed, and we'll just keep socking it to them, just keep fighting the good fight, and we'll get there in the end, one way or the other.
Excellent. Well, thank you. This has been Shooting the Breeze with Lady Liberty and Rick Munn, and I'll see you next time.